that keys are to the glory days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. I want to take a look at the 49ers roster and how it looks for the stretch run because they did nothing at the trade deadline. And I know that gets a lot of people frustrated. A lot of people are thinking the 49ers have just waved the white flag on the 2025 season. And I think if you feel that way, that's okay. I do think we need to take into consideration they did make a trade last week for Keon White. So if they'd have made it this week, it would have been a deal that they made at the deadline. They just did it a little bit of ahead of time. Now, do I think that they were looking around to make a deal and they couldn't find one that fit the parameters that they were looking for, which young and cheap seems to be what the 49ers like to do? Then yes, and I do think that they were in on Jermaine Johnson, the defensive end from the Jets. But ultimately, they didn't want to part with the second-round pick. And I can't blame him for that. Now, I have said before that if it would have been Will McDonald, I would have parted with the second-round pick. This was not Will McDonald. This was Jermaine Johnson. Will McDonald wasn't even on the radar because the Jets weren't going to let him go, even though they let go of a lot of players. Sauce Gardner, I didn't think, was going to be somebody that got moved, yet he got moved. Quinnen Williams got moved. But the 49ers didn't make a deal. So now we know that barring somebody getting released and then being claimed on waivers from the 49ers, they will not have additions outside of signing people off practice squads or potentially signing guys who are currently free agents or players that clear waivers. Because now that you've made it past the trade deadline, every single player that is released has to clear waivers. So before the trade deadline, if you are a veteran that has more than 4 vested seasons in the NFL, you don't go through waivers. You are automatically a free agent and you can pick any of the other 31 teams to go sign with. Now that's not the case. Now you have to clear waivers. Do things happen on waivers sometimes? Yes. But if you're a veteran and you get moved, or a young player and you get moved to waivers, any team can claim you. And it starts with the teams with the worst records. So the 49ers wouldn't be high on the waiver wire. So it's very unlikely they're going to pick up somebody through waivers. So we'll see how this thing goes. But I wanted to talk about some of the players the 49ers could be getting back, because I think that goes a long way in determining how good this team is. And they've got a really tough stretch run coming up. They've got the Rams. They've got the Cardinals. These are two of the most pivotal games of the 49ers season. If they go 2-0, they are almost a wrap to win the NFC West. That would put them at 8-3 after that stretch. They would have 5 wins inside the NFC West, and I think it would be really tough for another team to be able to beat them out overall. Now, it could happen, but I do think that would be tough. That would actually put the 49ers, I think, in the mix to continue to go after that number 1 seed. Now, if they go the opposite way, 0-2, I think it puts them in a tough situation where they're no longer the favorites to win the West, and they're battling and they're holding on for their playoff hopes. I do think that it gets a little bit tougher if that happens. If you go 1-1, I think it's status quo. You're thinking the 49ers are a middle-of-the-road playoff team that's probably going to be your 6th or 7th seed in the playoffs. So these 2 games are going to be a huge stretch, and the players that are going to be able to help are going to determine that. So that's what we're going to go into. We're going to talk about the defensive end position. That's the one that's been highlighted the most, and why people wanted them to get a Bradley Chubb or Jermaine Johnson or somebody to add to this roster. So we're going to evaluate where each room is at and just kind of look at this roster overall, and then talk about some of the players that could be coming back. Guys like Brandon Ayuk, which everyone thinks is a positive, and guys like Jake Brendel, which a lot of people are more up in the air about, especially with how well Matt Hennessy has played, especially this last week. I thought that he played pretty remarkable through the breakdowns that I've been able to do so far. So I think that this is going to be a fun one. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you're listening to audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network, please give it a 5-star rating. And of course, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel, the title sponsor of 49ers Cutback. So when we're looking at this 49ers roster, we know that there are some big weapons on offense that are still out. And I know a lot of the focus is on defensive line and defensive end, and I want to get to that. But I want to start on offense because if I think the 49ers can make the biggest stride forward, it comes from the offensive side of the ball. And I brought up Jake Brendel earlier, so I'm going to go ahead and start with him because I think he's the biggest mixed response that you get from 49ers fans. Most do not like the way he plays. There are some that value his intelligence and value the way that he kind of operates out there on the field. Now, I do think Matt Hennessy's done a pretty good job in his time that he started. So they've got a couple of guys. Now, they've got Ben Bartch getting ready to come back. And so Ben Bartch is an addition to this 49ers team that they desperately need. They were getting ineffective left guard play. Last week with Spencer Burford back in the lineup playing left guard, it looked like a different offensive line. And that was not a New York Giants defensive line that isn't effective rushing the passer. And that's where I'll keep the focus. They haven't been good stopping the run this year. I think a lot of it has to do with the secondary play, some of the linebacker play. But when it comes to defensive line, you've got Dexter Lawrence and Kayvon Thibodeau and Abdul Carter and Brian Burns. You can effectively rush the passer. And what we saw was the 49ers do a pretty good job. Now, minus Colt McKivitz struggling, getting cooked on the outside. I broke down exactly technique-wise what he did wrong against Brian Burns on the strip fumble from Mac Jones. But besides a couple of things here and there, they were really effective. And it wasn't a perfect sheet, right? A clean sheet, but they were effective. And there's other times you notice that Spencer Burford makes things a little bit more easy for Trent Williams because he understands the offense, he understands the scheme, he understands what he's supposed to do as far as passing players off, and they did a really good job. So I think that is the first and foremost is stabilizing left guard. And with Spencer Burford back and Ben Bartch potentially on his way back, I do think that that's happening. So they're almost getting an instant upgrade to the offensive line just by getting a couple of guys back. Because at worst, Ben Bartch goes and becomes your left guard, and Spencer Burford becomes your left tackle again. That's phenomenal. Now you've got the swing tackle just in case something happens. You've got a offensive guard in Ben Bartch that you felt comfortable giving him the starting job going into this season. And I thought he was a little bit more effective early on in the season than, probably people realized. And so you've got a situation then where you're 6 offensive linemen deep, and that's important. That also means you're 7 offensive linemen deep because Matt Hennessy's played so well. But stabilizing left guard makes things easier for Trent Williams. It makes things easier for the center as well and the offensive line as a whole. It also will allow the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan to fool around with some extra offensive linemen on the field, which we've seen them do last year with Jalen Moore. Put an extra offensive lineman out there and let him go block. I don't think that's going to be the norm, but occasionally that would be a good look, especially if it's Burford or Bartch who are hyper athletic and able to go out there and operate within this offensive scheme. So I think that's number one. Now let's talk about Jake Brendel. There's a lot of people that don't want Jake Brendel back into the starting lineup. I fully expect for Chris Forrester to put Jake Brendel back in the starting lineup as soon as he's ready to go. Now, today we're going to find out a little bit more. He's going to be reevaluated during practice today, and they're going to give us an idea of when potentially Jake Brendel could come back. I think Jake Brendel needs to come back sooner rather than later, and here's why. It either needs to be Jake Brendel or it needs to be Ben Bartch. The 49ers right now have Matt Hennessy as center. Besides Matt Hennessy, the only other center that has been eligible to play in these games has been Nick Zakelj. Nick Zakelj is on the practice squad, and he has used up his standard elevations. They would have to add him to the active 53-man roster. They do not want to do that. They don't have the roster spots for him for that. So the full expectation is either Ben Bartch gets activated this week, maybe he takes the spot that's going to be left by Mykel Williams, or they get a situation where Jake Brendel is just ready. If that happens, either way, Ben Bartch has to come back in the next 2 weeks. Maybe you get both. We'll see. But I think it's going to put the offensive line in the best position that they've been in since the season started. And remember, that week 1 matchup against the Seattle Seahawks was no joke. That defensive line was phenomenal. But it would be nice to see this offensive line get back to where they're getting. Now, who else are they going to get back? Maybe Ricky Pearsall. And he's going to come back this season 100%. But when exactly, we don't know. They're going to reevaluate him today as well. Ricky Pearsall could be lining up to play against the Los Angeles Rams on Sunday. It could happen. We'll see. But it's another huge addition when you're talking about offense. Ricky Pearsall has been missing, and the 49ers offense just put up 34 points against the New York Giants. This would be a huge addition to the 49ers. Ricky Pearsall was playing so well before he went down with the PCL. He was pretty much carrying the 49ers offense for a long time while Jawan Jennings was dealing with injury. George Kittle was out. He was doing a lot when it came to the wide receiver position. You know, Christian McCaffrey was doing everything else. But effectively, this would be a huge addition. Imagine what that does to your wide receiver room. All of a sudden, everyone moves down a slot, right? Ricky Pearsall, then Jawan Jennings, then you get Kendrick Bourne, Demarcus Robinson. That's huge. That's huge. Now you've got weapons on weapons at wide receiver. You can get more of a rotation. You can get more looks that you like, more matchups that you like. But Ricky Pearsall can run any route. He makes tough catches. He can produce yards after the catch. That would be huge. Right now, at times, you're going with Sky Moore or Jordan Watkins. It's not like they've done bad, but Ricky Pearsall's way further along, way more dynamic, way better player than both of those guys. That would be a huge addition. And I would be remiss if I didn't bring up Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk's window did not get open this week, but here's why. When the 49ers open up Brandon Ayuk's 21-day window, they have to activate him within that 21-day window. If they do not, they have to shut him down for the season. So they are going to make sure that Brandon Ayuk will be able to come back within that 21-day window. So they are being cautious, but this is kind of the time, right, where we all expected him to come back, where the window would start to get open. But not just that, is Kyle Shanahan said week 10. Here we are, week 10. That's what they're preparing for. So I think that this is on the horizon. Brandon Ayuk coming back. And what a shot in the arm for the 49ers offense. You didn't get it in a trade. It's like you made a trade because you're adding two top wide receivers to your football team when you get back Ricky Pearsall and Brandon Ayuk. And think about how this offense has responded just from getting George Kittle back. The effect that George Kittle has on a defense and how he draws attention. There's one play I broke down on Patreon. You got Christian McCaffrey drawing attention from one player. You got George Kittle drawing attention from three. That's right, three linebackers. Oh, yeah, and there's Kendrick Bourne wide open in his route concept because those guys have the gravitational pull that they have. That's an effect. Now, what happens when you get Ricky Pearsall out there? All of a sudden, you maybe not pay as much attention to George Kittle and he starts making plays. Or they still pay attention to George Kittle and Ricky Pearsall makes them pay even more. That's the effect of it. Then Brandon Ayuk. All of a sudden, you have a guy that can run any route, that can get open in man coverage. And he is definitely a guy that can get yak and yards after the catch. He's somebody that takes your attention. All of a sudden, with Brandon Ayuk back, it puts Jawan Jennings back into a favorable role that makes him the best player that he can be. Start slotting everybody right back where they're at. Ayuk, Pearsall, Jennings, Kendrick Bourne, Demarcus Robinson. Are you kidding me? That's one of the best wide receiver rooms in the NFL. So these are some of the additions that could be coming that could take this offense to the next level. And we all know this offense needs to score points. They've been able to score points with Mac Jones all season. He's been effective. Imagine what he could do with more weapons, with a better offensive line. That's what's going to happen. Because even though this offensive line's not going to raise this game to the level that we all want, right? It was an addition of a big-time player that takes this offensive line to another level. It does go to another level. Because the guys who are coming back, Spencer Burford, Ben Barch, Jake Brendel, they've all been more consistent than the guys that were playing in their wake. Now, maybe not Matt Hennessy. Matt Hennessy's done a pretty good job. But when you look at the left guard spot, it definitely is. All the while, Dominic Pooney seems to be getting healthy. He looks a lot better. We have Trent Williams, who just had his best game of his career. It's really good situation for the 49ers. Now, there's one more offensive guy I want to talk about in a second. But if you're going to bet with FanDuel. Right now, the San Francisco 49ers are a 3.5-point underdog to the visiting Los Angeles Rams. Now, the money line is changing a little bit. 49ers definitely getting some bets going their direction, and the over-under has went up to over 50.5 points. That is a crazy over-under. They are expecting points from the Rams and 49ers. An interesting development because the 49ers just had their first game where they scored over 30 points. So there's going to be lots of cool player props, same game parlays, anytime touchdown bets. Check out FanDuel. A lot of fun. If you want to have an extra thing to bet on during the game, it's always a little bit of fun. So it's Brock Purdy. That's who I want to talk about as an offensive player that could be coming back. The 49ers are 6-3, and they've only had their starting quarterback for 2 games. That is remarkable, right? This is kind of like a crazy sequence for the 49ers, considering, in the past. And Brock Purdy was one of those backup quarterbacks that came in and tore it up, but Brock Purdy was a special player. They've been able to consistently win however they needed to win, whether it was defensive plays, offense getting it done at the right time, special teams coming through. They've been able to effectively do it without their $50 million quarterback. Now, I like Mac Jones. I think Mac Jones is effective. I think he's good. I've said I think he's a starting 32 quarterback in this league. I do. I believe that. I think the 49ers could trade Mac Jones during the offseason if they felt they were going to get a lot back for him, and they would get a lot back for him. I do. I think that they'll get a pretty good haul for Mac Jones because he's proven how effective he is, plus his contract is super cheap. Might be why the 49ers try to keep him next year. But Brock Purdy changes things when it comes to this offense. He can make the throws Mac Jones makes. He can read the defense the way Mac Jones reads it. He can put the 49ers into certain plays that need to run. But he also has added elements. He creates outside the pocket. He creates off schedule. He delivers the ball a little bit more vertical down the field than Mac Jones does. He also makes some more tight window throws because of his anticipation. So I think that it's still a upgrade getting Brock Purdy back. And when you get that guy back, you don't just get a player that can make the plays, but you get the leadership, right? You get the energy. And I think that that's big. And Mac's done a great job. I love the one this last week where Jawan Jennings and Demarcus Robinson and Kendrick Bourne are celebrating the touchdown, right? And Mac's trying to get involved in the back. He's coming up. I think Mac Jones is phenomenal. But make no mistake, Brock Purdy's a better quarterback. And if you get Brock Purdy back in this offense and you add in a healthy offensive line to go with Ricky Pearsall and potentially Brandon Ayuk, this offense has 30 points per game potential. It does. Christian McCaffrey's back, guys. Christian McCaffrey's playing so great. George Kittle with the added weapons will do even more damage. And so this is one of those things when you look at it, it's like, oh yeah, the 49ers didn't make a move at the trade deadline, but they're still going to get moves that happen that are going to elevate the potential of this team. And so I think when you look at the offense, it's going to be changing significantly. The offensive line is better. It will be better. Ben Barch is an upgrade. Spencer Burford's an upgrade, whether that's at left guard or even as the backup tackle. Those things are huge. Jake Brendel coming back, whether he's the starter, which I believe he will be the starter again. We now know Matt Hennessy is very solid playing center. So 49ers got depth on the offensive line. Is it top line? Top of the line offensive line? No. Is it consistently better? Yes. And I think, make no mistake, once you had a different left guard, it definitely made a huge improvement. But let's look at the defensive side of the ball, because I do want to talk about defensive end, because I think that is the position that most people wanted the 49ers to address. And I would have loved to have had Jermaine Johnson or Bradley Chubb playing for this 49ers defense, especially coming off the edge, because I think that would have taken this defense to another level. Because when they had Nick Bosa and Bryce Huff and Mikael Williams and Yetur Gross-Matos, this defense was legit. Now, with Gross-Matos, I don't know if he's ever coming back. I can't sit here and confidently say, oh, yeah, when he comes back, this is what's going to happen. Now, I do think that he has the potential to come back. I think the 49ers are prepared to bring guys off the IR, except for one. They are going to save one spot on their IR, and I can tell you why. In 2022, the 49ers saved one IR spot. They did not bring back Hassan Ridgeway, which they really wanted to, because just in case they could bring back Jimmy Garoppolo. And they were hoping that Jimmy Garoppolo could come back and be the backup quarterback to Brock Purdy for that stretch playoff run. Now, we all know he didn't get healthy. He ended up having foot surgery, and that spot ended up being wasted. But the 49ers are going to save a spot for Fred Warner. just in case. Right now, I mean, and I never count out Federico. I just don't. The guy could be back sooner rather than later. And I'm not talking sooner like in the regular season, but when you get to the playoffs, if the 49ers get a home game by winning the division and they're able to get through the wild card round, I would not be surprised if Fred Warner was ready to go by the divisional round. I just, the guy, number one, is a freak athlete. He takes care of his body better than anyone, but that's kind of the timetable that has been talked about. So I do think that they'll save one spot. So that might determine whether Yetur Gross-Matos comes off the IR or not. Now, I do think that they could use Yetur Gross-Matos, and that would be a huge upgrade for the defensive line. So let's take a look at it. We know Mikael Williams is going on the shelf. Now, for the good news for the 49ers is Bryce Huff is coming back. He is expected to play this week. So with Bryce Huff back, the 49ers defensive end room looks like this. You've got Bryce Huff, you've got Keon White, you've got Sam Okuwanu, you've got Robert Beal Jr. You've got those four guys on your active roster currently. And then you have Clelin Ferrell, who had his first sack as he returned to the 49ers last week. Now, there's one of two ways that things could happen. We know Mikael Williams is going to go on the IR. That's going to free up a roster spot. The 49ers can handle this two different ways. They could easily just say, okay, Mikael Williams, IR, Clelin Ferrell, we're going to promote you to the active roster. That definitely could happen. What they could also do is put Mikael Williams on the IR and promote or bring back Ben Barch from the IR. I think that's probably the most likely. I think then they elevate Clelin Ferrell off the practice squad again as he comes in and plays. So what does your defensive line look like when you're talking about starters? Well, Keon White is getting more used to playing in this defense. So my expectation would be that Keon White and Sam Okuwanu would be your starting defensive ends, with Bryce Huff coming in on obvious pass downs, and that moves Keon White inside, and then they bring in Robert Beal Jr., or I think they would like to bring in Clelin Ferrell if they could have him up there. But they're going to have to play some games with the practice squad and with the active roster. But as you can see, they do have capable bodies. Keon White is a young player who had a pass rush win rate of over 33% last week, which led the 49ers. So first week in the system, not even really knowing what Chris Kaceric's doing, he did a pretty good job. Sam Okuwanu had a really good game last week. He has 2 sacks this season. Let's see what happens if he can continue to grow and develop. We know Bryce Huff is an absolute stud. I thought Robert Beal Jr. had probably his best game as a pro last week, generating pressure and putting pressure on the quarterback. Did he get home? No. Was Jackson Dart able to get away? Yes. But I thought it was a good sign. And then Clelin Ferrell proved again that he is a consistent starter in the NFL. He sets the edge good against the run, and he's able to rush the passer. So even though I don't think that this defensive end room is electric or dynamic, I do think with them bringing back Bryce Huff this week, they have enough pass rush. I think Bryce Huff can definitely generate pass rush. I think Keon White is going to be a problem for the inside. And then Clelin Ferrell and Sam Okuwanu are going to continue to compete and continue to bring you some things on the inside. So I kind of understand this defensive end room is not as electric as we wanted it, because Jermaine Johnson or Bradley Chubb, that speed element off the edge, would have taken it to another level because it would have kicked other guys inside and went back to what things are. But you still got the potential of getting Gross-Matos back. And if that happens, this defensive end room would be really good on obvious pass downs. You would have 2 guys that could win on the inside the way you did before with Gross-Matos and Keon White. Unfortunately, Mikael Williams was that other guy before. But that would be huge, because then Huff and Okuwanu could rush off the outside, and that would be extremely dynamic and obvious pass down. So I think that when you look at the roster there, I'm feeling pretty good. I mean, I'm not feeling great, but I'm feeling pretty good about consistency and playing the run tough. Now, when you look at the interior defensive line, Jordan Elliott and Kalia Davis are still there. They're the day one starters. I think Kalia Davis is flying under the radar. I think he's quietly had a phenomenal season. I think he's been the most dynamic interior defensive lineman that the 49ers have. Jordan Elliott has had some splash plays as well, but every single week it feels like Kalia Davis makes a play, whether he has a giant club on his head or not. He's doing something in the backfield to cause a negative play that helps the 49ers get off the field. Then you look at Alfred Collins, and I feel like he continues to develop. He's playing through injuries, but he continues to develop. 49ers have had CJ West as a healthy scratch, and then they have Kevin Givens. And I think that they're comfortable with his interior defensive line. I think that they don't have the dynamics on the interior part of this defensive line once they get past Elliott and Clea Davis. I think those guys are the wreckers. Those are the havoc guys. But I think Alfred Collins is getting better stopping the run. And with Kevin Givens, he can always generate pass rush from the interior. Not very good at stopping the run, though. And so I'm hoping that, sometime in the season, either he gets, more healthy or CJ West gets a little bit more playing time. But the 49ers definitely have depth there because they have guys on the practice squad as well. I mean, we talked about Cleveland Farrell for defensive end. But when you look at the defensive tackle spot, they've got guys there as well. They got Sebastian Valdez and Evan Anderson both available on the 49ers practice squad if they need guys. And, at defensive end, I talked about Cleveland Farrell. They also have William Bradley King as well. So, I mean, the 49ers are not without players on the defensive line. They have depth. And is it as good a depth as you wanted? No, but they do have depth. Now, with linebacker, we know it's going to be Winters, Bethune. Luke Gifford's going to continue to play that Sam linebacker spot. Curtis Robinson has proven that he can be a consistent sub. And then Nick Martin has finally started to make plays on special teams. So I think the linebacker room looks pretty stout. And then you look at the cornerbacks. Renardo Green, Deommodore Lenoir. I thought Renardo Green had a very good game against the New York Giants. Deommodore Lenoir, I think, has played Pro Bowl caliber football this season. And then Darrell Luter Jr. in his limited time that he got, I feel like he's played a lot better than anyone was expecting. So the cornerback room is a little bit better than we thought out on the outside, and they still have Eli Apple that they have on their practice squad if they need to bring him back. So I know that there's some conversation, and maybe the 49ers would look, at maybe Asante Samuel, because I do think that if there's a place you could upgrade at corner, it is your nickel corner. And it's not a indictment on Upton Stout. I think Upton Stout's played really well, but I think Upton Stout, as far as when it comes to recognition of pass concepts and kind of covering guys, is a little bit slow right now. I think he pulls the trigger, does great in the run game. I think it's the passing game, and we saw the Rams really take advantage of him with Jordan Whittington last time. And so I think that he's going to be targeted. And last week he gave up 55 yards on 5 catches. And so I think if there was one spot you could upgrade, it would be that. Now, will the 49ers pull the trigger? I don't know. I know Asante Samuel's going to Carolina to meet with them, and he's probably going to make a little bit of a tour as he tries to find a spot. So it's probably going to be Upton Stout. They're going to roll with the young guy. They still got Chase Lucas behind him as well. But, I think if there was one spot as far as the cornerback room, I think it would be that. But I do like Upton Stout. I think he's going to keep getting better. Now, when it comes to safety, I mean, Marquis Siegel was a healthy scratch. They're rolling with Jair Brown, Malik Mustafa, and Jason Pennick. I will say this. I think it might have been, one of their better games. Malik Mustafa looked the most comfortable that I've seen him. He looked like he was figuring out this defense, and he looked comfortable, made a really good tackle inside the 5-yard line that forced a field goal for the New York Giants. So I thought Malik Mustafa finally started looking more like Malik Mustafa as he's finally getting some of those game reps and getting accustomed to playing NFL football again. That's good news. I thought Jair Brown's tackling has gotten better over the last 2 weeks. Not superb, but better. And that's something that they're going to need. But those guys are going to have to cover well, along the way. But I think having Bryce Huff back, a legitimate pass rush threat, is going to help how long those guys have to cover. I think that's going to be huge. So basically looking at this football team. Now, the 49ers did not make a move on the trade deadline, but they did add to this team with Keion White. And probably the biggest thing that I take away from looking at their roster is the additions that they're going to have now. Bryce Huff is coming back. That's going to be a huge addition at defensive end. They've been playing without him over the last few weeks. That's going to be huge. Getting back Burford last week and Ben Bartz, that's a huge upgrade to the 49ers offensive line. Getting back Ricky Pearsall, that's going to be phenomenal. Potentially getting back Brandon Ayuk. What that means for your wide receiver room, they could take this offense to a whole other level. Brock Purdy, you haven't been playing with your starting quarterback and you're 6-3. That is remarkable. And when you start adding up the sum of all these things that you're going to have as some of the key things that they've done, they've got more juice than I think it looks like from the outside. This is going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited to see where the 49ers season goes. Do I know that they're going to make the playoffs for sure? And they're going to, no. But I think that's part of the fun right now. 49ers are sitting in a good position. They're 3-0 in the division. They're 6-3 overall. And these next 2 games are going to be highly pivotal. So if they can get a win, if they can split, it's one thing. If they can win both, man, that's going to make it tough for everybody else in the NFC West, that's for sure. So thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you're listening on audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network, please give it a 5-star rating. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Until then, stay safe. Remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.